Senior editor at National Review, Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill, and Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. So there's a lot of confidence at the White House that this went how they wanted it to go. What's your breakdown, Jonathan?
I think short term, it's a pretty clear victory for them, and you outlined why. But I think long term, it's pretty dangerous, actually, because this isn't really a great legislative victory. This is basically an agreement to a process. Then we have 3 weeks, and then we're back at the table. And what we know from looking at the Senate and observing the Senate over the last number of months is that this is not a Senate capable of passing a hardline immigration bill that's going to appeal to Trump's base. So the calculation inside the White House right now is it going to be enough if the Democrats give us X billion dollars for something that we can call a wall? Is that going to satisfy the people who elected Donald Trump on this very hardline position on immigration? There's no way they're going to get the chain migration and all these other things that Stephen Miller has on his wish list. It's just not going to happen. Matt?
I disagree with Jonathan. I actually think this is a huge change in events. I was a staffer in Congress during the 1996 budget showdown and the shutdown. And Republicans learned 2 things in dealing with Bill Clinton. Don't investigate too aggressively, because I thought they lost on that, and don't have these spending fights and don't have these showdowns. What Donald Trump has done in coordination with Mitch McConnell is actually make Republicans believe that they can actually spending fight and do it in 3 days. This is going to change the dynamics in Washington. Is it easy to get an immigration bill done? No, we haven't done it for 25 years. It's going to be tough to get an immigration bill done. But this sets the table and puts the Republicans in a stronger position they've been on spending questions than in a generation.
All right, and we heard Britt Hume say he doesn't remember one that went the Republicans' way.
Right.
Shut down. Take a listen to the House Speaker about their sense of this.
There are no winners here today. I want to make that clear. This is not a moment to pat ourselves on the back, not even close. We very much need to heed the lessons of what just happened here.
We have 10 1/2 days left before we have another crisis in funding our government. Let us try to use every one of those days to reach agreement on funding the government.
Politically, in the short term, you had people like John Tester up for re-election in Montana, voting against this. You have Dianne Feinstein, who likely will face a primary in California, saying that she was very disappointed in the deal to end the shutdown, saying from the left that Schumer had caved.
Yeah. I spent most of the afternoon thinking, very much like Matt did, that this was a big victory for Republicans. I'm moving much more in Jonathan's direction towards the end of the day. To answer your question first, though, the Democrats are in a position, it's a weird sort of Twilight Zone remake of 2013, where the argument across big swaths of the right, particularly talk radio right, was all you have to do is fight, power of the purse, 40 senators can do whatever they want, we can shut down the government. And now you have, either because of people like Dianne Feinstein are being primary challenged, or people who are planning on running for president, like Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, you have a bunch of Ted Cruzes on the Democratic side. And one of the things that this has done is, I'm not sure it's demoralized the left-wing base of the Democratic Party. I think it's put a lot of them into sort of Tea Party mode, where they're all declaring war on the establishment. They're all declaring war on the guys who sold them out. Now, getting back to your first question, though, the Republicans gave Democrats one of the things they wanted, and they did it without any strings attached. 6 years of funding for CHIP with no reforms whatsoever. That is one less inducement to get Democrats to vote for whatever they come up with by February 8th. And you have now a situation where we could go through all of this all over again, and the Republicans have fewer bargaining chips, and the Democrats have every incentive now, if Mitch McConnell doesn't come through with bringing something forward, of shutting down the government again. Again, I think short term, Republicans won this messaging. I agree with Britt Hume. Long term, I think this might set up some interesting dynamics.
Weren't they getting closer? Weren't they on an immigration back and forth. I mean, depending on what you believe, what the president said and what Schumer said inside the White House.
Look, a couple things. First of all, on the Democratic question, this shutdown strategy was a disaster. Let's be clear. Going back to it, I'd love it if they would do that. That'd be great. On immigration, you're right. We know the 4 things that have to be in the bill. If there's anybody who can get to a deal with hardliners on the conservative side, it's Donald Trump. If you look at the statements from hardline immigration groups on the idea of putting these 4 things together, they're willing to go along and see what that product is. We have a chance to do this in this country. Donald Trump's the only one who can get it done.
The question is whether that Tuesday cabinet bipartisan meeting with Congress, where I'll take the heat, whether he really will.
Well, see, the problem is passing what he actually means by that, because in that same meeting, Feinstein said, we want a clean DACA bill, and Trump goes, great. And then McCarthy has to sort of step in and say, well, no, actually, we need some border security with it. And that's half the problem with these negotiations, is because people come in, and it's just the way Trump talks. He talks in fairly loose, sort of high-level phrases. So you have people coming out of the room with different ideas of what it means, and then it comes back to square one, which is you have fairly hardline staff in the White House, like Stephen Miller and John Kelly, saying, no, this is what we need. They're in coordination with Cotton and Perdue. Then you have people like Jeff Flake and Lindsey Graham, who, frankly, I think Jonah pointed this out in the green room, they shouldn't be regarded as Republicans in this negotiation. They're basically Democrats on this issue. They are completely in keeping with Dick Durbin and the others that they're negotiating with. So the idea that that original bill was bipartisan was a fantasy. So it's just a very, very difficult issue. It's difficult. Matt worked out. There's no question.
It's difficult but doable.
Senator Graham, Jonah's email is...
what happens in the green room stays in the green room. My God!
Vice President Pence in Israel, speaking to the Israel Parliament, the Knesset, and saying, we're going to speed up the timeline on moving this embassy to Jerusalem. We're back with the panel. Jonathan, the hopes and dreams of a big Middle East peace deal, it seems pretty tough to get across the finish line.
Well, it's kind of bizarre because you've got the White House team, and it's a very small team, Jared Kushner, the ambassador, Jason Greenblatt, working on this deal. We haven't seen it. We haven't heard any details. It's been the most leak-proof operation in the White House. And they say that they're continuing to work on this deal in this sort of vacuum almost, because you've got the Palestinians out there publicly saying, we'll go jump in a lake, we won't deal with you. So we're going to find out sooner or later, at some point they're going to release this deal. And at some point we're going to find out whether the Palestinians are bluffing or whether they're actually willing to engage with what's on that document.
Matt?
I think Middle East peace is, I'll agree on this one. That's an awfully tough goal to get to. How about some security? How about people taking the American president's word for what it is? And folks realizing that when we draw a line in the sand on Iran getting a nuclear weapon, that we mean it. And I think if we can accomplish those things, I think we've gotten a lot done in the region.
Speaking of Iran, here is Shannon Bream asking the Vice President about Iran.
Today, in your speech at the Knesset, pretty heavy, tough words on Iran. So where do we go from here, and what partnership do we have with those in this region that will make a difference?
The last thing that we want to see after driving ISIS out of Iraq and literally on the cusp of driving ISIS out of existence in Syria is to see Iran and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard fill that vacuum. And the United States of America and our allies are simply not going to let it happen.
You can see that interview tonight, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. He also said that the United States will no longer certify this ill-conceived agreement, the Iran deal, and that will never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, no, look, I think what ties all of this together, for years people refer, when they say the Middle East conflict, they think it means about Israel. We have Middle East conflicts all around the region that Israel is no part of. Events are moving past the Palestinians. The real drivers of change are in Saudi Arabia, to a lesser extent Tehran, and events are passing by the Palestinians as Israel and the United States move forward on this. Mahmoud Abbas, I think, is in the 13th year of his first 4-year term, and what you see is just simply that, for good or for ill, the Trump administration is simply moving past these old paradigms, and a lot of the Middle East is going with it, and it's leaving these people who are locked into these old systems in the dust.
Lastly, how's he going to be received at Davos?
Trump? Oh, I mean, there's, his collection of enemies in the crowd. It's the global elite that he campaigned against. But, Trump has got some good personal relationships with some of these people. Macron, in particular, has been encouraging him to go to Davos. So it's not all, animosity, but a lot of these people